Welcome to Callous Coder. Today we will use real science to see how accurate the SidKick Pico is compared to the original SID in the C64. Motherfucker! There have been dozens of channels already reviewing the SidKick Pico, but they review it based on taste. We are actually going to use science to compare how accurate the SidKick Pico is to the original SID. And we're going to do that with wave comparison. So if you have a wave and you flip it 180 degrees in phase and you add them up, it should be 0 if they are identical. If you hear something still, then things aren't really as identical. Now, they probably will never be 100% identical, but how similar are they? That is really the answer that we want to get. And I'm curious as well. Because when I got this one, a swing SID was in there. And the moment I play something, I was like, what the hell is this? It doesn't even sound like a SID. It sounded very, very digital. And I look at it and I was like, dude, you sold me a working C64 original bread bin. Original, I expected to have an original SID. And the guy was like, oh, well, you actually heard the difference? I said, yeah, massively. He said, well, just send back the swing SID and I will send you the original SID. And that was a nice solution, so thank you, Ben. So the original SID is in there, so we can actually compare this. This kit was sent to me by Wolfgang Kierder from the Retro is the New Black. So thank you, Wolfgang. I'm going to use my original Pico, but Wolfgang included in the kit also this Chinese version, the knockoff version. Every now and then there are some compatibility issues with these. I have not found them yet, but just to be sure I use my original, and I want to use this one for something else because the LED on there is so very, very useful. So thanks, Wolfgang. And he also sent us the stereo kit, so we can actually modify it to stereo, but currently we're going to make a box standard mono version SID, so we can compare the waves together with the original SID. So first I need to solder it together. We've seen many videos doing that. And I mean, it's soldering, come on, it's soldering a couple of headers. How hard can it be? There is an order in there that you need to follow, which makes sense as soon as you look at it with 2 rows of header pins. You want to think about it. And Mr. Fornication, I believe his name is, actually put it on his GitHub. So check that out just to be sure. And there you go. It takes you about 10 minutes and you have a nice SidKick Pico. So let's do the real work and compare how accurate it is. Out with the original SID, in with the SidKick Pico SID.
Let's see what it does.
There were a couple of caps in the way that I just carefully bent over, so the SidKick Pico fits in there.
Yes, we want to sit. Fingers crossed, here it goes. It works, and it sounds good.
Okay, so the build is done and we have sound. And I immediately hear that this sounds good. Now what we're going to do is actually now write a program that plays the, well, I would call it the oscillators. And I think these are sampled the way that they sound, because it really sounds very close to this. And then we will record them on my 24-bit digital recorder into the computer, and we will swap phase. And if you have a perfect sine wave, for example, and you swap the phase and you add them up, the result is 0. So that is how we will compare this SID to the SidKick Pico. And then generally you can make a deduction as to how similar this SidKick Pico is to the actual, in this case, 6581. So this is the little basic program that I wrote.
basic is perfectly fine in this case. We're not doing anything quick. It is in the repo, link below. There's also already the program that I extracted from my disk. So first we have a data array of 3 data types, which is the 33, which is a sawtooth wave, 17, which is the square wave. That sounds a bit like a sine, and 65, which is a pulse width modulation. Then I set up the base address of all the SIDs. This is a trick that I once read in a Jim Butterfield book way back in the mid-80s. So that way the 24 different addresses of the SID, you can just scan through and set everything to 0 to initialize it. Here I set the ADSR to an immediate attack. Here I set the node, the lower part of the frequency, the upper part of the frequency. It's a 16-bit value. So I believe this is C. Then we read through that array one step at a time. And if it is -1, that means the end, we go to 1000 and we turn off the volume. Plus 24,0 is turn off the volume, and then we end. And otherwise I print which one we're using, 33, 17 or 65. And then I set that wave shape. Then we set the volume to 15, which is full on. And then we let it play for a little bit. We turn it off. Then we stop for a little bit. Then we turn on the filter and we sweep through the 255 spaces of the filter in one go. And we make it a low pass filter because that's usually the filter you use the most. So we do that, we sweep through the filter, and then we set everything back to normal and turn it off again. And then we repeat for the next one and the next one. So basically we get a tone, then we get a filter sweep, and then we repeat that. And intermittently there is a nice little break so that we have some space to cut and paste the wave shapes. So that is the basic program. So I don't have image, but I do have the sound coming out of my studio monitors, because the RCAs are now here, as you can see. Comes into my channel 22. And I can also have some control of the level then, because the level is definitely different between the two SIDs. So I can control the level a bit on the input to get them close, and the rest we will do in post. But at least we can hear something now.
And now you also want to see something. So invent something, Mr. MacGyver. So I put the RCAs into my mixing desk, the ones with the audio output. But I do need the screen of the Commodore 64. So I got this extension cable. I only have a big problem. Of course, composite is yellow and I only have red and white. So I think I will try the white. It's the closest to yellow, right? So let's see. And otherwise I will just paint them yellow. That should be good as well. So let's plug these in and see if we get some image on the screen. And then we can actually load the programs. Now look at that. I plugged a white cable into a yellow cable and it still works. Who would have known? I always thought that electrons were bigots, that they were racist. That it would only flow out of the same color cable. Who would have known that they actually didn't? Fascinating. So I'm capturing the data here. And one thing that is very clear is that the SidKick Pico is a lot softer sounding than the real SID. So I'm balancing some recording levels here to get those the same, and the rest I'll do in post. And then later on you will hear things a lot better.
Harmonic content.
Because then we will actually use the real recorded samples. This is from the camera.
Okay.
So out with the SidKick Pico and in with the original SID, and then again we do a recording of the program.
And then we will cut the samples. And now comes the tedious part of aligning all these wave shapes of the samples that we did. So 3 times 2, 6 times I need to align the beginning perfectly. I'll need to make sure that everything is the same level. And yeah, that is a bit of a tedious process. And initially I do that with the wave shape still being in phase, because that makes it easier to line up. And then I will flip the phase of the SID. So I lined them as close as I could and play them together, and this is the residual. Very, very soft. And then we play one of the individuals, and you see actually in the lower one, this one, the SID, that there's a lot of noise on that sawtooth, and that is one of the causes of the residuals. And the amplitude is actually the same, but you see the recorded amplitude here. And then the filter sweep, yeah, the filter sweep is definitely where things are different, as expected, because filters are very hard to make identical. Wow, that filter really does a number on the Pico square sweep. Really does a number on that thing. Don't understand what is happening here. Because we just saw how clean it was. It is, wow. I think that this should be the period that it goes down. So we're a bit out of phase here. This is a tough one to align. Again, you see how aggressive this filter starts compared to the analog one. Yeah, this filter really puts some harmonic content in there. So actually doing the pulse width modulation is the worst. This is the biggest residual that we have. And you definitely hear it, and that's because the filter on the SidKick Pico actually still behaves as a filter, where it has no effect anymore on the actual SID below. Fascinating part is also, if you look at this filter sweep, you see this pronounced dip in there. You don't see that in the digital version. This is pure analog behavior, this wavy texture. Yeah, here we have the similar characteristics of that filter. Here you see it very cleanly, it's cleanly modeled. Here it's a bit more noisy, it's analog after all. But then, here you see the analog filter has no grab on it anymore. And this still works on it. That's the residual, yeah. But still very, very, very close. Very, very, very close. So now let's have a listen at the residual render. The less you hear, the better, remember that. Okay, so this is the render of the residual. So let's go through it and then we listen to it. Here that's a little marker, that's for my own convenience. It allowed me to hear where things start. So here something is initialized, and here we see the sawtooth wave residual. I think this is timing based. That the timing is just a tiny bit off between the two. It could be my alignment, although I'm spot on. Could be maybe an interrupt that is just processing on the program. This is something, yeah, this is absolutely perfectly negligible, and it's at minus 30 dB. You hear it, but it could be a human error or interrupt based. You do see some noise. That is the noise that we saw on that waveform of the actual SID. So this is really, really as close as you could get it. So then we go through the filter sweep. And you see that residual again. Yeah, That is pure the fact that on the SidKick Pico, the filter is still working on the remaining signal, where an analog filter is not really having any effect anymore. So that is what you see, that pulses with the same frequency, of course, so you hear that, but also that is at around minus 30 dB. It's negligible. Then we go to the sawtooth. Initially it takes a while to settle, and then you see that it's only the noise that is there. Also, this is around a minus 30 dB, even less. So it's truly the noise on the SID that is remaining here. And yeah, that pulses, of course, in the same frequency as the sawtooth, and that's what we will eventually hear. We can zoom it in, you see this, it's just noise floor. Alright, then we come to the triangle with the filter sweep, and again here, yeah, we have the residual of that noise, very little of the filter working on. And again, the timing, right, there is a little bit here that for some reason one or the other is still playing. It could be interrupts, I think, maybe on the basic. And then we go to the square wave. Yeah, similar. Could be duration that is left, and of course a noise. But this is the worst one. The pulse width modulation is by far the worst one. And here with that filter, that we really saw that the filter is still holding on to signals of the SidKick Pico when those signals are no longer being attenuated by the original filter. So let's play it now and really hear what is the difference. Again, the less you hear, the better. That's the marker. Here at minus 42 even. Wow. Minus 42 residual. Yeah. That is at minus 36 for the square. Minus 36 for the square wave filter. That's the fuzzy of the pulse width. And then that filter that still is working, resonating. Once more without my talking.
So there you have it. We used actual science to prove how accurate the SidKick Pico is to the original SID. Now, as expected, it's the filter where things are not as exactly the same as you would expect, but still very, very, very useful. Because the analog SID filter, of course, you cannot model analog to perfection in digital. Digital is just completely perfect. And analog, it's always a little bit off, and that's also what you saw with the waveforms. I was amazed though that the pulse width modulation was, well, actually the worst. The sawtooths are very, very similar. Of course, there is a little bit of noise here and there, and amplitude just is a bit different. So 100% identical they will never be, but very, very useful. And it is actually the same with the filter. It's not perfect, but it's close enough to be a very, very valid alternative. Better than the Swin SID Pico that originally was in this thing. Because the moment I turned it on and played something, I was like, what the hell is that? Well, that was definitely not an original SID. So So I hope you learned something. We actually did real science. All the other channels, they do great stuff, don't get me wrong. But why did nobody else think of this? Like, let's do actually a waveform comparison. So I hope you learned something and see you in the next one.